Welcome to the basics of APA style. In this video, we'll cover some of the areas where students struggle in terms of APA style. The video is not meant to be comprehensive in terms of covering all the elements of APA style, but we hope that as we hit the highlights of some of the areas where students struggle, that this video will be helpful to you. So you may be writing your very first paper in APA style and wondering if APA style is just a collection of arbitrary rules meant to frustrate you. In fact, it does have a purpose, and the primary purpose is to enhance communication by standardizing the style and format in which you write and communicate to other academics in the field. So the purpose really is to enhance and improve and facilitate comprehension. In addition, APA style is a required format for your capstone research project, so whether that's a dissertation or your EDS field-based research project or even an assignment in class, APA style is required. And if you opt to publish your capstone research project or some other research project you've done in your graduate program, more than likely the outlet will require that you format the work in APA style. So there's a lot of reasons for you to be familiar with and know APA style well. So what will we cover in this video? We will cover verb tense and voice, citing resources in the body of the paper, how to use direct quotes, and touch very briefly on APA formatting. We've created a series of cheat sheets that are in the module that cover this more extensively. So we'll just hit the highlights on APA formatting. So let's first talk about voice. APA recommends that an active voice be used in writing, but note they don't require it. They recommend an active voice because it's more direct and allows writing to be more concise, and frankly, it's easier to comprehend. Consider the following two examples. The claim was made by the researcher. That's the passive voice. The researcher made the claim. That's the active voice. As you can see, the active voice is much more direct and to the point and easier to understand. Even though APA recommends an active voice, there may be some cases when a passive voice may be recommended or preferred, and that case may be when you want the emphasis to be on the object of the sentence rather than the actor. So consider the following two examples. Here's the passive voice. The chocolate charge theory was not supported by the results of the study. Here's the active version. The results of the study did not support the chocolate charge theory. So you might want to use a passive voice when you want to emphasize the chocolate charge theory, which is the object, the theory in the sentence. But overall, APA recommends an active voice. Verb tense is something that students struggle with in their writing. So in an academic paper, usually there's a literature review, a method section, results section, and discussion. And the literature review, because you're reviewing studies and works and theories that have already been developed in the past, you're going to use past tense or present perfect tense. In the methods section, again, since if you're writing this and you've already executed the study, then you've done everything already, it's completed, so you use past tense again. So for example, the participants completed an assessment, that's past tense. If you are writing your prospectus or an IRB protocol, you haven't yet done the study, then you will use future tense, so the participants will complete an assessment. In the results section, we're assuming that you're writing this because you've already done the study, you've already analyzed the data, now you're reporting it. So this is, again, an area where you would use the past tense, such as the results showed. The discussion is a little bit different because here you are sort of actively thinking about how you interpret the results, how it aligns with other research, so you use the present tense, such as these results align well with theory X, Y, and Z. Okay, so one area that students also struggle with is citing sources within the body of their paper. So remember, when you are describing a study, a theory, methods used, ideas of other authors, you always have to give them credit and cite them. And one other benefit of citing your sources is not only will it keep you out of trouble, but it also lends credibility to your own ideas and the arguments you're trying to make. So if you show where you got the ideas, how they align with others' ideas or results in the field, then that just adds credibility to your own work. And again, you want to be careful. To avoid plagiarism, you always need to cite your sources, even if you've summarized or completely paraphrased another author's works or words in a completely different way. You still need to cite them and cite their ideas. The final thing I want to mention is a concept called patch writing, and students sometimes don't realize that this is actually a form of plagiarism. Sometimes when you're reading over a reference, you may, especially like a journal article, and you're looking at the abstract, and there's a couple of key sentences that describe the results that you want to capture. It's very easy to copy the sentences and change a few words, and then you think, oh, you've changed a few words, so you're not plagiarizing. But in fact, that is a form of plagiarism. Even if you cite your source, you need to completely rephrase and paraphrase and put in your own words everything that you cite. Okay, so how do you cite a source, a series of sources within the body of your text? Here's a fictional example that we can discuss. There's growing evidence that students perform better on exams after eating chocolate peanut butter cups. Hershey 2010, Love Candy and Bars 2000, Reese's and Reese's 2018. So here you're citing a series of journal articles or works, resources. When you're citing at the end of a sentence like this in parentheses, you always use an ampersand when you cite a source as multiple authors. And here's the tricky part. You want to, the order in which you cite sources, you go alphabetically by the last name of the first author. You don't go chronologically. As you can see in the example, we didn't go chronologically, we went alphabetically by the first author. And then you use a semicolon to separate the sources you cite. Okay, so here's another example of maybe when you want to cite a work in the body of your paper and you kind of want to emphasize or go into detail on a particular study. So here's another fictional example. Love Candy and Bars 2010 asserted that providing students with 1 ounce of chocolate 10 minutes prior to an exam improves performance significantly. So in this case, you want to cite all of the authors in the study, especially if that's the first time you cite them. You don't use an ampersand here. You spell out the word and then you cite the year in the body of the text in parentheses. Now, there are some times when you might want to focus on a particular study, just as we did in the last example, but you want to draw the reader's attention to a particular page where something is discussed or a series of pages where something is discussed. So here's a fictional example. Reese's and Reese's 2010 claim their learning theory called the, quote, chocolate charge, unquote, is a new contribution to the field of education, page 2012. So let's say we want to cite the page that the chocolate charge theory is discussed because it's maybe the first time this theory has ever been discussed, and it's an important source for your readers to review. And if you have one page, it's P period and then the page number. If you have multiple pages, it's PP period and the series of page numbers. And you'll use this when you want to draw attention to a very specific idea, theory, method, finding, or we'll get into this in a moment when you're using a direct quotation, but I'll show you how to do that in a moment. But in general, when you're summarizing the results of studies or writing in generalities, you don't need to cite page numbers. You only use this format if you really want to draw your attention to something very specific or noteworthy. Okay, so sometimes in academic writing, it's common to use sort of generic sentences such as researchers have found or studies have shown, and you may think that you don't need to cite your resources here, but you actually do. The reader is going to expect, if you make some claims like this, that you show your evidence, that you show where you got that information from. So here are a couple of examples. Researchers have studied this problem for decades. So here I'm making kind of a big claim that there are a lot of researchers that have studied it, and it spans over decades. So I need to show that. I need to provide evidence. So my citations go across multiple decades. And then here's another example. There are numerous studies that corroborate the interpretation of this result. And again, this seems like kind of a generic sentence, but you have to back up your claim. So what are those studies that match your results? And you have to cite them. Okay, so let's move to direct quotes. As a rule, you should use direct quotes very sparingly. You want to use them when you simply couldn't state something or phrase it better than the original source, or maybe you want a little drama to highlight a phrase or a sentence that an author has stated in their work or resource, but you really should use it very sparingly. So here are a couple of formats that you can use to use direct quotes, to cite direct quotes. Here's example number 1. There may be foods other than chocolate that have properties that facilitate learning. A group of Scottish researchers claim that, quote, butterscotch may be as effective as chocolate for decreasing blood pressure before an exam, and this in turn may boost performance, end quote. Ian Wish, 2013, page 10. So you'll notice here that you cite your resource after the quote, and when you're quoting like this, you do need to cite the page number. So here's another, if you want to emphasize more the specific study, then you can spell out I and wish, and you spell out and, cite the year 2013, stated that, quote, butterscotch may be as effective as chocolate for decreasing blood pressure before an exam, and this in turn may boost performance, end quote, and then you can put the page number at the end and quotate in parentheses. So again, keep in mind that if you use a lot of direct quotes, they kind of lose their pizzazz and effectiveness, so use them sparingly. And the other thing about using direct quotes is, you help the comprehension of your reader if you have a consistent voice. And when you're using other authors' voices in direct quotes, it kind of breaks up the comprehension. So that's another reason to use direct quotes sparingly. All right, formatting in APA style. Again, we have a cheat sheet that we'd like to draw your attention to that goes over some things such as APA citations, how to format tables and figures, and then general formatting, for example, how many inches your margin should be, where the running head should be, etc. So look at the cheat sheets for that. But we wanted to draw your attention to something, and that is, when you're learning abstract rules such as APA style rules, sometimes it's helpful to reinforce those rules with concrete examples. And we wanted to draw your attention to the fact that the APA manual does have a sample manuscript in it. So we urge you to review the sample manuscript. Okay, we're going to end this video with a little recap. So keep in mind the APA style is new to most graduate students, and it's worthy of knowing because you're going to use it a lot in courses and if you publish, but just go easy on yourself because it does take time to learn it. A few more tips to help you learn. Ask your peers or fellow students to review your APA style writing and do the same for them. You'll be more likely to catch each other's mistakes, and you'll learn from catching each other's mistakes. And then the final tip would be always write papers in advance of the deadline so that you can set your paper aside for a day or two and then come back and look at it with fresh eyes. You'll be more likely to catch APA style mistakes if you do that. So I hope this video has been helpful to you, and good luck with your APA style writing.